Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning into today's video. Hi, if you're new, my name is Brenda, and today we're gonna be doing a part 2 on the Skinwalkers urban legends. But this one's gonna be Skinwalkers UFO. It's gonna be the Sherman Ranch really that I'm focusing on. But before we fully get into it, make sure you give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe if you're new. If you do not know what a skinwalker is, go check out my last video. But a skinwalker in the Native American legends is a person with a supernatural ability to shapeshift into any creature of their desire. Like I said, we're mostly going to talk about the Sherman Ranch skinwalkers, which is in Utah. So let's take it back in time during the Civil War. So during the Civil War, some Ute bands joined the Kit Carson military campaign against the Navajos. And so what that really entails is the Navajos were made to leave their land, even though it was their homeland. This campaign was established so they would basically kick out the Navajos out of their own land. They were forced to march to a reservation in Fort Summers, New Mexico, and this is called the Long Walk of the Navajo. Even though later on it was revealed that the campaign was in the wrong, the Navajos were allowed to go back to their land. However, the Ute believe that the Navajos put a curse on the Ute tribe because of them helping Kit Carson in their military campaign, which it kind of makes sense as to why the Navajos would, if they did do that, why they were upset as to why the Ute tribe helped the Kit Carson campaign. So that is like the gist of that. You can go into more of it on your own, but this video would be much longer, and I already know it's going to be a long video. So in the 1990s, a ranch in the northern East Utah, far away from the Navajo reservation, became a partial focus of the Skinwalkers. And this is known as the Sherman Ranch or the Skinwalker Ranch, and also the UFO Ranch. And the reason is because this place has a history of people reporting that they see these skinwalkers, that they see the UFOs. They even see like Bigfoot, Sasquatch, however you want to refer to him. Cattle mutilation, crop circles, I believe that's what they called them. And this is located near the Ute Indian Reservation. And like I said, the Ute tribe believed that the Navajos put a curse because of how they help. And the Ute tribe also believes that this curse generates back to 15 generations. They don't believe that the Skinwalkers live on the actual ranch, but more like around that area. And they hide out in this place called the Dark Canyon. So according to reports, the Ute people have seen skinwalkers in their areas numerous times. The witches have been spied near the ranch, on the road of Fort Dutchesons, I believe that's how you say it, and on various areas of the reservation. One account describes a large black hairy humanoid figure with dark red coal eyes like. And one person described it as seeing a skinwalker with the head of a dog smoking a cigarette. And then other people have claimed that they've taken pictures of tracks that they'll leave, these skinwalkers will leave, and that they are tracks that are not typically something you would see. So now let's talk about the UFO sightings. So in the 1950s, numerous reports of UFO sightings have been made. So this land, I would say, is basically cursed because for a long time there have been many sightings of UFOs, and you'll see why I mean that. So in the 1700s, Spaniard explorers described to seeing UFOs. Now, how they would describe them as is random lights in the sky that would flash, and then the typical UFOs like sighting that we see is like the circular disc, and then it's with the light from the bottom picking up something. For a long time, people have claimed to have seen UFOs since the 1700s. So like I said, they're described as being oval, cigar looking, round, and triangular. So by the 1970s, the Highway Patrol was getting so many UFO calls that the troops stopped going out to where people would claim they would see these UFO sightings. That to me is bizarre. I mean, I get it, but it's still like, why aren't you still going just to see, make sure everything's okay? And every time that these incidents were being reported, the local ranchers would report that their cattle was being mutilated in bizarre ways. So let's talk about a scientist. His name is Joseph Jr. Hicks from Roosevelt, Utah. He investigated more than 400 UFO sightings in the Utah Basin. He found that the UFO sightings often coincided with the mutilation of cattle, crop circles, and over the years, people have claimed that they have seen creatures from the windows of like the spaceship that the UFOs have. Now, let's get into why it's called the Sherman Ranch. This land that I'm about to talk about was owned by some individuals known as the Myers. Now, they experienced a lot of things, but they never wanted to talk of what they experienced. Interesting and horrifying at the same time. So the Myers left this ranch in 1987, and that land was not occupied by anyone because no one wanted to buy it. And it stayed like that vacant for 7 years until Terry and Gwen Sherman in 1994 bought the ranch. Now, my guess is they either didn't believe that anything was wrong with the ranch or they didn't know, which I would go with they probably didn't know. So the couple moved in with their 2 children and their live cattle, so they brought everything with them on this farm. And the Shermans were surprised when they found out that the previous owner had placed deadbolt locks on doors, windows, of like the barn outside, but also inside of the house. And like the kitchen cabinets and drawers had locks on them, which they found very interesting, as they should. And then at both ends of the house, there were iron stakes and heavy chains were installed, which they just figured it was for guard dogs. The very day that they moved into the ranch, the family spotted a large coyote. And if you thought it was like a normal coyote, you're wrong. They saw that coyote in by their pens where they keep their livestock, and it grabbed a calf. So they grabbed a cow by the nose, trying to take it away from that pen. So the son and father, the Sherman boys, I guess Sherman men you can call them, they went after to chase the coyote or wolf, whatever they thought it was, and they began to beat the wolf. So they got close to make it release the cow. However, they were not successful with doing this. And so then the father went to go get his shotgun and shoot it at point blank, but the wolf or coyote, whatever it was still holding on to the cattle. And then the dad shot again the cattle, and that's when the wolf or coyote finally decided to let go of the cattle. And so when the men went after to see what it was, they saw that there was no trace of blood and there was no animal to be found. And they had followed the tracks because, they leave tracks. However, when they got to like the end of the tracks, it seemed like as if it just disappeared. There was no more tracks. That is a very scary to encounter. And this is kind of just foreshadowing what is about to come. So a few weeks later, after these incidents, Gwen, the wife of Mr. Sherman, was driving on the road when she encountered a wolf that was so large it covered from even afar like her whole windshield. So when you're driving and you see an animal, it only covers like the middle. No, this wolf covered like all of it, which is insane. So when Gwen saw this, she also saw that wolf had a animal like with it next to it with a dog-like animal, but she could not identify it, and that's just very interesting to me. That's all that's really said on that regards. Now, let's talk about things everyone would notice around there. So over the next 2 years, the Shermans and their neighbors would often see animals that do not belong in that area. These included exotic animals, multicolored birds that are not native to that region. And they sometimes reported that they'd see a tall, hairy beast. And they believed that that was the Bigfoot, or how other people know him as Sasquatch. So on one occasion, the Shermans encountered a hyena-looking animal that was attacking one of their horses, which they described as this hyena animal, very low on the ground and heavily muscular, weighing maybe 200 pounds, with curly red hair and a bushy tail. Which, sir, that does not sound like a hyena to me. And as Mr. Sherman approached, this hyena just disappeared. This animal just vanished right before his eyes. Now that, I don't know how that was not a sign that something's wrong with this. So after this animal vanished, they went to go check on the horse, and they saw these large claws dug into the horse, on its body and on its legs. And then a few months later, a neighbor reported spotting a similar creature to what the Shermans encountered. So the Shermans, like their neighbors, often saw strange things in the sky. They saw strange lights. They saw flying objects, more than 1,000 in one evening. And on many occasions, when they would spot these UFOs, their cattle would go missing. And I'm gonna briefly talk about a story about 7 cattle that went missing during one of their sightings of the UFOs. So 7 cattle disappeared, 4 without a trace of what happened to them, and 3 were found dead and partially mutilated. So one of the dead cows had a peculiar hole in the center of its left eye, but was otherwise untouched. Another was found with a similar hole on its left eye and a 6-inch hole about 8 inch deep that had been carved out of its rectum. You heard that right. It was carved out of its rectum. So the last cow that was killed, it was mutilated, and it was last seen by the Sherman's son. And then 5 minutes later, it disappeared. So let's talk about this last cattle. So it again had a 6-inch wide, 16 inches deep cord out of its rectum. It had a hole that size carved out of its rectum, and it expanded to the cavity of its body. So like from the rectum to like where the ribs are, I would think. I'm not sure though. And in the case of all 3 cattle, there was no trace of blood found in them, and a chemical odor was apparent, and there was no evidence of a predator, and there was no footprints, there was no tire marks, there was nothing. So it was like literally magic, I guess you can say, happened to these poor cows. So let's talk about a little bit of the scenery. So sometimes the neighbors and the Shermans would see that twigs would be all over the place and the tops of trees would just be cut off. So pastures would unexplainably light up at night, and the sound of heavy machinery that could be heard that was from underneath the ground. And that to me is very scary. Like, why is it coming down from under the ground? So guys, I'm not gonna lie, as I'm telling you this story, I'm like getting like chills, and I don't ever get chills, so I'm just taking my sweet time with it. So they also claimed that there was poltergeist activity, meaning things would disappear and reappear, and then they would hear strange disembodied voices that often spoke unfamiliar languages, and then crop circles, flattened grass were found on the ranch. So now let's talk about what was the final straw for the Shermans, because they did leave the ranch after, I believe, like 4 or 5 years. So it happened. happened in May of 1996 when Mr. Sherman was outside with 3 of his dogs. So the final straw occurred in May of 1996 when Mr. Sherman was outside with 3 of his dogs. So Mr. Sherman noticed a blue orb darting around in the field. So it was like bing, 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 bing near his ranch house. He urged his dogs to go see what it was. That's great of you. You coward, you sent your dogs. I would not send my dogs. I would personally go myself. So the dogs started to chase and bark at this blue orb, and they followed it into a thick bush. Mr. Sherman just heard the 3 dogs make a horrendous yelp, and when he called for them and they didn't respond, he just left them there. And the next day he went to go check on them, and what he found were 3 greasy lumps, and they appeared to have been scorched on the spot, and the dogs were never seen again. Which, when reading this, it really like irritated me, like, why would you send your dogs? But I know everyone is different, and they were probably like guard dogs, herder dogs, but still, it made me a little bit sad and upset. After 2 years of the family moving away, they decided to start publicly speaking about what they encountered in the Sherman Ranch, which is great because, you know, we get to hear his side of the stories. But it was only for a little bit. So Mr. Sherman would be talking to journalists about all the things that he had encountered at his ranch, and this made its news around. So the conversation about the ranch first appeared in the Salt Lake City, Utah Desert News, and later in an alternative weekly, Las Vegas Mercury, as a series of articles were written by the journalist George Napa. I don't know how you say his last name. So George Napa is a co-author with Colm Keller, who is the author of a book in which they detail eerie investigations into alleged UFO sightings in the Uinta County region, and the vanishing of mutilated cows, large animals with piercing red eyes that had no injury when struck by bullets, invisible objects emitting destructive magnetic fields, crop circles, Bigfoot-like creatures, and poltergeist activity. The Shermans planned to sell their property. However, before they got a chance to sell their property, a millionaire businessman named Robert Bigelow, he's a big believer in UFO-ology and the founder of the National Institution of Discovery Science, offered to buy the property after he read about the events in the newspaper. And Robert bought the ranch for $200,000 on a non-disclosure agreement with the Shermans, who agreed not to talk about their incidents in the Sherman Ranch any further. Now, that's like the end of it, but there's a lot of more things to go into depth with Robert Bigelow, because the U.S. government is involved in this, and this video is already long, so I might have to do it for another video. But that is all I have for you guys today. So as you guys can see, the Sherman Ranch seems to be maybe cursed by the Navajos, or it's just a really unlucky land. But that is all I have for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. It was really eerie because it made me feel weird as I'm filming this. I'm happy I'm filming during the day, but that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you guys found this video entertaining and amusing. I hope I'll catch you guys on the next video. Please give this video a big thumbs up, subscribe so our community keeps on growing, comment down below any comments that you have for me. Go follow me on Instagram and TikTok. I post often on TikTok, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.